monsters don't wait. So gear up and let's welcome Team 7.
Hello, we're Team 7, and this is our original game from the depths. My name is Sophia, I was the producer on this team, and I'm also a programmer.
I'm Pritha, I'm a programmer.
I'm Austin, and I'm the other programmer.
I'm Rachel, an artist.
And I'm Michelle, the sound designer.
So here's a demo of our game. So who here likes Greek mythology? Raise your hand. A lot of you, awesome. Our game was based on class discussions about Greek mythology, and so basically you are a demigod who was unjustly cast into Tartarus, and you have to try and fight classic Greek monsters to survive.
So here are some of the concept art that we had going to pitch presentations. Our game was originally designed for the Cavern, which is a CMU projection system that has a 270-degree view around the player. So on the bottom, you can see one of our cave designs. We would have a layered cave system that would depend on the height of the enemy you were fighting, whether that was the regular enemies or the boss enemies. But after we transitioned into VR, the height was no longer an issue, so we just have all the enemies on the ground level. And then on the top, you can see some of our designs that we would have for our enemy characters.
So initially we were designing for the cavern, so we had these things called vibe trackers to constantly track where your player is and where they had their sword pointing towards. So we designed it technically to be a two-player game and for this to be a collaborative hack and slash, but this changed a lot.
So as it was mentioned, we were developing for the Cavern, that was our original pitch, and we spent 4 out of our 5 days before interim presentations working in the Cavern. And then it broke. The PC sounded like, as I like to describe, a dying car from the 60s. So we had to transition to VR the day before our interim presentations, and because of this, we had to cut a lot from our game, one of which was multiplayer, and then we also had to cut down on art, and we had to cut down on some sound and programming, and because of this, we had to extremely narrow our scope. So after we transitioned to VR though, honestly, it was a lot easier in terms of managing it. The Cavern had a huge learning curve, and we were able to come up with a finished game that I think we're all proud of.
And here are some of the enemy designs that we created and modeled. We went for a low poly and just like simple textures to help not only with scope and time, but also to keep a cohesive style throughout the game. So here are some of the characters. We have a hellhound, we have a lost soul, and then a bat and a snake. And then next, we have some rocks for the environment, as well as the boss enemies, which are the orc and the cyclops. We had originally wanted to go for a lot more humanoid characters, because those are some traditionally like Greek mythology characters in the underworlds. However, after we got some feedback during interim presentations, we had to cut down on a lot of that and adjust our characters to become creatures that would take a lot less time to rig and animate.
So after we switched to VR from the Cavern, instead of using our Vive controllers to track where the player is, we were able to use the controllers on our headsets. It was much easier to use, and now our swords were much more accurate and you could feel the feedback. And we also had to narrow it down to a single player game, which is kind of sad, but it's still pretty fun. So our game runs on an infinite wave system. Each wave has a random number of enemies that you will spawn for you to fight. And every 5 of these normal waves, you'll switch to a boss scene where you can fight a boss until either the boss dies or you die. If you defeat the boss, you go back to the normal waves. This is a cycle of 5 normal waves and a boss scene again and again until you die and lose. And so your enemies are going to be spawning from all 360 degrees around you, so you have to constantly be aware of your surroundings. And since this is pretty hard for your player to actually play the game, we added both long and short range attacks, which we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, so as Pritha mentioned, we have implemented both melee attacks as well as ranged attacks in order to help scale the difficulty of this game since enemies spawn all around you. So as the player, your main weapon is a combination between a magic staff as well as a spear, and this allows you to shoot out a magic particle from the tip of your spearhead whenever you press the trigger on your controller, and in this way you can aim at your enemies and hopefully kill some of them before they can actually get to you. Now, as for the melee aspect, your spear has a little pommel at the bottom which you can use to stab downwards, as well as a spear tip at the top which you can use to hack and slash at your enemies when they get too close to you. And our UI system is also implemented on the left hand, and it displays vital stats such as your health, your wave, as well as your score. And we also have full screen fade effects like blood splatters, as well as fade in, fade out panels in order to increase immersion. And this was probably one of the biggest challenges we had while developing this game, because the Cavern's UI system functioned really much like your normal UI system, and it was really easy to implement. But VR was much more touchy, and it didn't support a lot of the features we used before, so we had to split down our system in order to make it compatible with VR.
So for our enemies, the bigger they are, the more difficult they are to kill, and the more damage they do. This was done so that not every enemy would just be a retexturing of each other. Our boss, however, works a little bit differently. The movement is more sporadic and random, and this was done to disorient the player and make it a tougher battle because it is a boss enemy. It also for our enemies, when they attack you, they hit you and then they run away. And you can still try and kill them to get points, but they will not come back and attack you. However, the boss enemy will attack you, run away, and then come back to attack you again. And this was done so that the boss battle just continues onwards until you're able to kill it.
And for the sound effects, we use,
and as I mentioned, when the enemies hit you, they run away, and this was done in order to prevent the swarming, because if there were 15 enemies attacking the player all at once, they would get super overwhelmed, and they would die super easily, and this was done to balance the game more.
and so for the sound effects, we use Audacity to edit the audio, making it sound like you're more inside of a cave in this echoey environment. So every time you transition into a new scene, you would hear this very haunting sound like you heard in the demo. So when you start the game, this sound will play. And every time a new wave of enemies approach you, you will hear this sound. And every time you lose, you'll hear this sound. We also implemented sound effects for all the enemies. Here are just a few of them. This is the Thatcher. And this is the Orc. And this is the Lost Soul, which is kind of like a ghost scream. And we also implemented other sound effects like the enemy footstep, the collision with the enemies when you hit them, and that pew pew sound from the demo. And so for the intro theme, we were thinking about something very haunted, very slow. So we first used MuseScore to compose some chord progressions and then add melodies to the choir, violins, bass synth, and drums. And we also used waveform to add realistic instruments and make it sound like you're more inside of a cave. So for the background music you may have heard from the demo, it sounds really similar to the intro theme. This was because we used similar keys and chords, but we added more emphasis on the choir and violin to bring out the tension and bring that kind of feeling